Hi everyone, and welcome back to my Wargames hobby channel. Last time I was on, I mentioned to you, and in fact I gave a quick review on this book, the Lion Rampant Crusader States book, which is a supplement to the rules Lion Rampant. And I said that when I get a bit of a break from doing other things, I'll put on a demonstration game of how to play Lion Rampant using two armies from the new book. And that's what I'm going to do now. I've finally managed to set up a game in my little vault hole here in my garage, and I'm going to run through this game with you. Now, because when you go through a new set of rules on a video, I've learned from past experience that it can take a long time to cover everything, so obviously I won't be doing that. But what I will try and do is cover the basics for a complete beginner, someone that's thinking of taking up wargaming from this period, or trying a new set of rules and haven't used these yet and would like insight into how they work. So that's what I'm going to do today. It's probably going to take longer than I want, but I will try and keep it down as minimum as possible. I've already set the table up, as you can see here, and you can also see I've done sort of the first couple of moves really just to save time. And I want to go through first before we do the next move, because we're in a position now where both armies are now got units within range of each other, so it's going to start to get interesting. And before I do that though, I want to go through the reasons why I've picked the troop types I have. Now you can see, rather than keep referring back to the book, I've made a couple of sheets of the armies that I'm using. Here we are. The blue one are the Christian military orders, 1120 to 1291, which is that one. And then I've done the Saladin, Ayyubids and Mamluks list, which is there. It's two-sided. It just really saves me keep having to find the right page in the book. If I've got them all on one sheet, I find that a lot easier to do. And you can see in the top here, it lists exactly what it is I'm using. I don't know, you can see that very well. But before we go any further, I just want to go through the book very quickly to show you what we're going to be covering. Right, I like the introduction Daniel Mersey uses in the book. He says, "Welcome to Lion Rampant, a set of simple miniature wargame rules designed for fighting historical or Hollywood battles in the medieval period." And I do like the goals that he set himself when he wrote these rules. If you look down the bottom here, you can see what they are. So games about knights should be fun. I like that. Absolutely, any war game should be fun. The emphasis is on playing a medieval game rather than an over-detailed simulation of medieval warfare. So no unusual dice, just use D6s. No cards, no supplements. Actually, he has done a supplement now, which is what I'm doing these two. But even so, it's a good supplement that doesn't change the rules in any way. Keep the rules simple. I'm all for that. Streamlined, rather than spend half the game going through a rule book trying to find what you're supposed to do. Quick play, a minimum of record keeping, which I'm all for. Gain a period feel by differing profiles of troops. Avoid complex core rules. Think small scale combat, a skirmish game rather than big set piece battles. Offer malleable army selection, no hard and fast army lists. Embrace the medieval caricatures. Knights should be headstrong, spearmen resolute, tribesmen fierce, and light cavalry agile. And create, I like the last one, create a medieval miniature war game that's an excuse to push some colourfully painted models around the table. I like that. So what you need to play this game is obviously you need this book. You need a list of profiles for each unit, which I'll cover in more details later. an opponent, although at the moment with COVID we can't get an opponent, so I'm playing solo. It works equally well solo, I believe. You need obviously an army of miniatures, a handful of dice. You need really ideally 12 d6 dice. You need a tape measure, a table to play on with some terrain. Not a lot of terrain, although I like the terrain to look realistic. A flat surface, ideally 6x4. I'm using 4x3, but you can get away with that quite easily. And some markers to indicate battered units. It suggests for a good game for 2 people, 24-point retinue. I've played everything from 12 points upwards, even up to 36. It's a good game for 2 people for a couple of hours. I think once you get above that, you need more people, and it will take longer. Certainly, there's no reason why you couldn't do a game for 4 people, each having, say, 24 points each. And quite straightforward with the dice. So you need 12 dice, d6s, and basically high scores are good, low scores are not so good, which I like. Each model represents 1 figure. It doesn't matter if they're not singly based. You can do multiple figures on a base as long as you have a small dice maybe to indicate the casualties on that base. All measurements are given in inches in these rules, but there's no reason why you can't convert them to centimetres. You will always round down fractions unless otherwise noted. And the distances between units are measured between the closest model of each unit. The distance between 2 models counts as deciding if units are within range in the rules or not. There's no unit facing as such, because they're individual figures, they can shoot all round. And just use common sense. The rules for Lion Rampant will not cover every conceivable situation. Just decide sensibly what is right for you. Then there's the unit profiles, which I go into more detail later. Unit cohesion. This is where you ideally should keep, if you see here, a gap of 3 inches between units to make sure they don't get mixed up. I find that sometimes difficult to do, especially on my 4x3 table. I'm making sure that they are though at least 1 inch or 2 inches apart. And again, keep it simple that if you move a unit, these knights you can see here have moved, select a figure and they should all be within 3 inches of that figure. So you can't spread a unit off across the whole table. They have to stay, fairly close to each other. You have some decent terrain on the table. Roughly marshland, wide streams, rivers, deep snow, steep hills, woods, etc. are treated as rough terrain. And generally that halves the movement of quite a few of the troop types. Again, I'll cover that in more detail later. Obstacles generally are fences and walls, etc. They usually take a whole move to climb over those. If you think they're only a small wall or a small fence, you could say half a move. It's up to you, I think, to decide on that. Leaders are part of the unit. So if you've got a leader with a unit of 6, it is 6 figures, not 7. He's not an addition to that unit, he's a part of it. They fight as an ordinary model. They give a +1 advantage for all courage tests for units within 12 inches of the leader model. The leader can be killed, although it's pretty hard to kill them. If a unit takes a casualty while the leader's there, you roll 2 dice. If you get 2 1s, the leader is the casualty. They generally are the last figure left in that unit, unless that happens. There are leader skills. I'm not going to do that in this game, but it's quite a bit of fun to throw to see whether your leader has a skill or not. It's just between 2 and 12. Just take the worst one. If he's rolls a 2, if you roll 2 1s, he's forgettable. There's no discernible qualities rather than he's got a fine moustache. Very funny. And if you roll a 12, he's a great leader whose unit automatically passes all move, attack and shoot activations. Oh, and rally tests as well. So if you roll a double 6, you've got a good leader there. What happens each turn? You basically have an activation phase. It's a you go, I go game. So in your turn, so you do all your moves first, and then your opponent do all theirs. When it's your activation phase, you play through the following sequence. So issue a challenge. I'm not doing that in this game, but leaders can issue a challenge if they're within 12 inches of the opposition leader. You can rally battered units, which I'll cover in more detail later. You can activate any wild charges, and then you can do normal activations. Again, I'll cover all that in much detail later. There's a good chart here that shows you how you can activate. For example, the start of your activation phase is do an enemy leader within 12 inches. You decide if you want to make a challenge or not. Do you have a battered units? They must be done next. And then you must do any units with wild charges. And then you activate any other units. When you're activating units on that section, if any then fail, then you don't do any more activations. That turn, your move is over. It goes over to your opponent. When you activate a unit, they can do certain things. They can move, they can shoot, they can attack, they can skirmish. And if your test is successful, carry out any of those activations. And if it fails, it doesn't do anything. It just stands there. If you're testing for wild units, incidentally, and they do fail, then that doesn't stop you doing any more activations. A wild test is considered different. You can also countercharge and evade when it's not your turn. You have to roll to see whether you can do those. Usually it's 7+, but again, I'll cover that later. When you come to shoot, you literally choose a target. You shoot using the rolls to hit. The target removes casualties depending on what their armor is. And then if it does take casualties, it must do a courage test. Basically, a unit with an armor of 1, you remove 1 model for every hit inflicted. If it's got armor of 2, you remove 1 model for every 2 hits inflicted. Armor 3, 3 hits, and armor 4, 4 hits. Quite straightforward, really. If you're in any sort of cover, the armor is increased by 1. So if you're behind this wall, for example, if this unit opens fire on that one there, their armor would go up 1. But if this unit opened fire on it, it wouldn't. Quite straightforward, really. So attacking is very similar. You choose a target. The target may take an action if allowed. That's evade or countercharge. Move the attacking unit into contact. Fight the battle. Both sides remove casualties and test for lucky blows if the leader is with that unit. Units test for courage if required, and if both units are still in contact, one unit will retreat. If the losses are, if one unit has lost more than the other, then the one that's lost more retreats. If they both lost the same amount of troops, then the attacking unit falls back. When testing courage, you roll 2 dice. Again, I'll be covering that later. As long as they pass, they don't have to do it. They can just carry on as normal. If they fail, they become battered. If they fail on 0 or below, which again I will explain later, they will leave the table. So that just about covers the very basics in the book. I'm going to go into a lot more detail when I play the game, and so let's move on. Right, so what I tried to do was I'm not doing a scenario from the book, because there are some very good scenarios in the book, and I'm really looking forward to playing some of them. But today, this is just an encounter to keep it simple. I've tried to use one of each troop type that the army list has. So, for example, the Christians have got heavy cavalry, which are the old men-at-arms. Incidentally, the description from the book to the Crusader book has slightly changed. So men-at-arms now are called heavy cavalry. Effectively, they're knights. Mounted sergeants are called medium cavalry. Mounted yeomen are called light cavalry. Okay, and I actually prefer the change they've done. I'm used to calling troops light cavalry, medium cavalry, or archers and so on, and skirmishers rather than bidderers. And foot sergeants, etc. I mean, it works fine for the rules, but for this period, I think it's nice that they've gone back to what I'm used to using. So the military order, Christian military order, have got a unit of heavy cavalry, which are effectively the knights, which are these ones. They've got a unit of medium cavalry. These are the ones with predominantly the round shields. Then we got a unit of light cavalry. We can assume that these are sort of like Turkomans. They would have, they did have some fighting on their side, so they're Turkomans on the right there. Then we got a unit of infantry with spear, another unit of crossbowmen, and in the marsh over there you'll see I've got 6. I've made them javelin men. They can be bowmen or crossbowmen, any sort of ranged weapon, and they're in the marsh. On the Saracen side we've got a unit of mounted medium cavalry, which are the old mounted sergeants, a unit of bow armed light cavalry. Then we have a unit of fanatics. These are the guys dressed in black. In fact, this is, you might well sort of think, hold on a minute, no, they look a bit like Moors. Well, they are really. That's what this army's painted as. It's in fact anything from the Arab period, but I painted them up as a Moorish army originally, but they can easily do Saracens as well. Or in the rule book are known as Fierce Foot. Then we got some light infantry, which are the old foot yeomen. They've got no armour, but they've got a spear and a shield. Then we've got some archers in the wood. And I haven't got any bidderers or any skirmish troops out. It would have meant it was more than 24 points, so I didn't bother with those today. But I have got a holy character at the back there. You can just about see him hiding behind the 2 units of infantry. It's because they do give a benefit to the units nearby, but they're not very strong in fighting, so you want to keep them back really. These guys, a holy character comes with a team of helpers, so it's a maximum of 6 models per unit and count as a unit of warband. So they're not very good at fighting hand to hand, but they do give a few bonuses. Yeah, so once per turn this holy character can force any unit within 12 inches that is friendly as well as enemy ones to re-roll 2 dice in any roll that requires 12 dice, or 1 dice in any roll that requires less than 12 dice. So that's going to be quite handy, but he's got to be within 12 inches to have that influence. And in fact you'll see at the moment where I have my holy man, he's within 5 of the units are within that distance, so he might be able to assist them. A warband can have more than 1 holy character. I've only got the 1 here. And the holy character also can act as leader of the warband, which I'm going to do today. So he's the leader of the warband. So I've listed the profiles, as I say, on a separate bit of paper, but if you look at the one first of all in the book that's mentioned in the book, that's the one on, we're looking at the one at mounted units, mounted men at arms. Just to go through that box first of all, before we do move on any more, if you look on the profile in the book, I'll just read across what the information is there. You'll see that the mounted men at arms, they cost 6 points for a unit. And if you look down the left hand column first, where it's got attack, so if that unit wishes to attack, it has to roll 5 or more on 2d6. So they've got a pretty good chance of if they want to attack, they can do. Moving, funnily enough, is harder for them. They're 7 plus. The reason for that is because, in fact, I'll read out what it says, because it's quite interesting what they've done, what Daniel Mersey has done here. Mounted men at arms are not the most tactically flexible unit in Lion Rampant. They have less interest in enemies outside their charge range, hence their poor move score, but will chase after any unit coming too close, like a greyhound after a hare. It basically means that you remember this period, you know, these knights are pretty sort of upper class, you know, they treat everybody else as below them, just as serfs, and in a battle they would probably let most of the army get on with it, and they'd just sit back and watch. Unless someone gets nearby, then they'll decide, yeah, we're going to go in here. So they're sort of fairly reluctant to move around the board, but once they do get near, they've got a pretty good chance of going in. One of the things in here is that normally a unit of mounted men at arms get this sort of wild charge, which means that anybody within 12 inches, they must attempt to charge them. But for this period, Daniel suggests, in fact, we make them drilled for an extra point, and this means they're better controlled. They won't go charging off unless you want them to. Then you can dice to see whether they do. So that's probably a good thing that they are drilled. They're going to be a little more controllable than normal knights would be. By going down the left hand side still, obviously they don't shoot. Their courage is 3+, which we'll cover later, but basically the lower that figure is, the more chance they have of not doing anything silly or running off. The armour is 4, which makes this unit the strongest unit on the table in terms of defence. They're really hard to hit. They're going to have to take 4 hits to cause a casualty on that unit. So if a unit of 12 attack it, they get 12 attacks, they're going to have to score at least 4 hits to be able to kill one of those men. So they're going to be hard to kill. So the strongest unit on the table. Then if you look on the right hand column, they've got the attack value. So when they charge, they hit on 3+. So they'll hit on 3, 4, 5 and 6. And they've got a 2/3 chance of their dice causing getting a hit. The defense value is 5+. So if they're charged themselves and they stand and take the charge, they won't fight as well. However, this unit does have the wild charge rule, which means that it may attempt to countercharge anything that charges it on a 7+. So really, they've got a pretty good chance of always fighting at 3+. They don't have a shoot value because they can't shoot. The maximum movement is 10 inches. And as you can see, there's special rules, wild charge and counter charge. But the wild charge is gone on this unit because I'll pay for them to be drilled. So that's just to break down a profile of one unit on the table. I won't go through the profile of every single unit. When they get in combat, if there's something that's important on that profile, I'll let you know what that is. Right, so when I set the table up, I had the Crusaders on the southern edge and all the Saracens on the northern edge, or I'm calling them Saracens, but they are the correct term. They are Ayyubids or Mamelukes, but with Saladin's army anyway. They're on the northern border. I did the first few moves just to get things going, and this is where we've ended up. So we're all now in position where we're now the next move. Units are near enough to be able to fight. As you can see here, these skirmishers are now near enough to be able to throw their javelins at this unit. They've got a 12-inch range, incidentally, javelins have. All skirmishers have got the same range regardless whether they're armed with bow or javelin. You're right, you could argue javelin should be slightly less range, but it says, I'm sticking to exactly what it says in the rule book. And these medium cavalry are also within charge range of 2 of the enemy units. I don't think they can reach the other cavalry. Let me just check. No, they can't, but they're certainly within charge range of these 2 units. So things will start to happen. Now the thing is with activation is that you have to be careful here, because the first thing, an activation phase consists of 4 parts. The first part of activation phase is that the leaders can issue a challenge. I'm not actually going to do that in this game. If you issue a challenge, the 2 leaders do fight, and if one of them dies, then for the rest of the game that army has to fight without a leader, and that's a big disadvantage. So I'm not going to do that. The second part is rally any battered units. Well, we've got no battered units on the table at the moment. The third part is activate wild charges. Now the wild charge, if this unit here had wild charge, which it hasn't, but if it did, it would roll to see whether it charged one of these 2 targets. In fact, this unit over here, when it's his turn, is also they've got a charge move of 8 inches, so they're not within range of that, so they wouldn't have to charge those. Incidentally, this unit over here, the Black Guard, they are a fanatical unit, and they do get a wild charge. And the other thing in these rules is that one unit can have a religious fervour, which is going to be this unit, and that means it will always pass a wild charge. It doesn't even have to dice for it. So if that does get within 8 inches of anybody, it will just charge in. Normally you dice to see whether a unit will actually charge or not, and if you fail, then the unit just doesn't move. and that doesn't stop you then doing the rest of the activations in the game, because that's the fourth part of an activation phase, is then the rest of the units that haven't already either rallied because they're battered or activated through wild charges, they have to do their normal activations. This is where it starts to get a little more complex, because if a unit, just say that this unit here activated to charge or to move or to shoot or whatever, and it failed, okay, that unit is actually the medium cavalry. So if you look on the board, there we are, medium cavalry here, it moves at 5+, it can't shoot obviously, and it would attack at 5+ as well. So if it decided to charge and then it failed, then not only does that unit not activate, then the rest of the units on the Crusader side don't activate either. So it really can slow you down considerably. And in fact, when I was doing those first few moves, that happened quite a few times, which is why things have got a little bit disjointed. It's the same for both sides. This unit, in fact, did move twice. It moved up here and then into this. This unit's only moved once because then it failed. And this unit's only moved once. This unit's only moved once, and this unit's hadn't moved at all, because once one of the units failed, then no one else moves. Oh, this one also here hasn't moved either. See, they're still waiting behind. Now this unit, of course, only moves on 7+, so it's best to leave that to last anyway, and you want to try and move the ones that are more likely to actually move. For example, the skirmishers, they move at 5+, the crossbowmen move at 6+, and so most of the Christians, in fact, when they move at 5+. So really you move all the ones that are more likely to move, so roll the 5+s first. So in this instance here, these skirmishers, if they want to attack this unit over here, they have to roll 7+ to be able to do so. If they want to move, and it's only 5+, so they've got more chance of moving. Anyway, I think we'll try and make them fire, or we could attempt to charge this cavalry. Now the cavalry do go in, they would charge in on a 5+, they could have a pretty good chance of achieving that. But wouldn't it be nice if these guys can weaken them up a little bit first? So I think that's the first thing we're going to do, and for this move. So I'm going to now go through the Crusaders' moves to see what happens, and hopefully you'll get an idea. So I'm going to attempt to throw these javelins at these spearmen here. We could in fact move up and throw javelins at the cavalry further away. But if they do that, they only fire half the dice. They move and fire. It's what's known as a skirmish move. And a skirmish move is they move half and shoot with 7+ still, but their shoot value is only hitting on 6s, rather than at the moment, if they stand where they are and fire, they're still 7+, but they roll their full amount of dice and they're hitting on 5. So I think they've got much more chance of doing that. So that's what we're going to do. Right, so the very first unit, these skirmishers are going to try and open fire over here. We do know that to attack they need 7 or over with 2 dice. Okay, they failed, so that's not a good chart, that's not a good start, which means that just shows you what happens. All the Crusaders now on this side of all the Crusaders now, that's it, they can't do anything else. Unfortunately, they failed miserably, and now it's Saladin's men warband to try and do something. So what's the best thing to do? Well, I think we'll try and move these guys over here. And in fact, if they do a 6-inch move, because they move 12 inches, they could then fire at that unit. Let's do that. So we're going to try and attempt to move that unit. Okay, well it rolled a 9, and they only needed to have rolled a 7 to achieve that. So now we're going to move. Their normal move is 12 inches. So now I'll do a 6-inch move. There we go. and then only one figure needs to be in range for them all to shoot, so it is within range. So with these rules, a unit that fires at full effect is rolling 12 dice. And I've already mentioned to you that like cavalry, they hit on 5+. But because they've done a skirmish move, they've done half a move and then shoot, they normally only hit on 6s. But this unit I've upgraded to an expert unit, which means they still hit on 5+. But because they've moved, they've only got 6 dice instead of 12. So they want 5s with 6 dice. Let's roll that and see what happens. Well, actually, that's not bad. They've actually got they've got 4 hits there, as you can see. Now the crossbowmen, if you look on the board, I've got an armour of 2, which means that every 2 dice is a casualty. So they've already taken 2 casualties. We'll take 2 of the axemen off. There we go. So they've already got 2 casualties on that unit. Now straight away, that means that the unit in question has to take a courage test, and they've got a courage of 4+. So we'll roll 2 dice. 7. It's taken 2 casualties, so straight away it goes down to 5. Also, the leader, which is this chap here, oh, in fact it's the one on the white horse, not the flag bearer, he is within 12 inches, so they gain 1 back, so they're on 6. Now the courage for a crossbow unit is 4, so as long as they get 4 and above, that unit is fine. So if the total had been 4 or above, then the unit has passed, which it has because it ended up on 6. There we are, bring that there. If it failed but was still above 0, the unit must retreat, and it also becomes battered after retreating, so that unit would come back here and it gets a battered marker. If it failed a courage test and your score is 0 or a negative number, then the unit loses heart completely and flees the table. So if you rolled really badly, let's just say I'd rolled 2 1s there. Let's say I'd rolled that 1, 2. By the time you take the 2 losses off, it does gain 1 back from the leader being nearby. It's on 1, so it's still okay. But let's just say that I'd lost 4 men and we rolled 2. And then we took those 2 off, and it's now on -2 because of the losses. 1 back from the leader, it's below 0. You can see if you roll really badly early on, then you lose a unit, but it's unlikely to happen initially. But every time you roll now from this unit, you take into account the losses that unit's taken so far. So if it loses another 2, maybe another 4 men, then it's going to be very difficult to keep that unit on the table. But anyway, it did pass, it was okay, and now it's the turn for the next of Saladin's troops to move. So what are we going to do here? Let's move those dice out of the way. No one is within charge range. The spearmen have got a charge of 8 inches, which is here, so they can't charge. So I think what we'll do is the cavalry are also not within charge range of those cavalry. We'll try and move these spearmen up. That's the next thing we're going to do. So spearmen, they've got a move of 5+. Yep, they can do a move, and they move at 8 inches, so they're going to move up quite a long way. There we go. Now we'll try and move the fanatics. They move at 6+. Yep, they can move up, and again they move at 8 inches. Now this means that next move, these guys are going to be able to charge and nothing will stop them. Right, the next move is we'll try and move the leader up. Again, no problem with that. The holy character moves in fact on 5+ as well. They do move 8 inches, so they're just going to come up into a position where they're with the leader. He wants to be able to influence as many troops as he can, so he's trying to stay, yeah, all of those units are within his sphere of influence. Now let's try and move the cavalry. Again, moving on 5s. Yep, they can move up. They can't charge, they're not within range of those anyway. They move at 10 inches, so they're just out of range. But they wouldn't want to charge into that marsh. I think we're going to put them into a position where they might be able to do something over here in a minute if they wish to. The last unit we can move is the archers. I think they need to come up. Although they're feeling quite safe in the wood, they're not doing anything there, so let's try and move them up. Yeah, they can come out of that wood. So we're going to move. Now in a wood, these are bowmen, and in a wood you can only move at half speed. And although they're in the wood at the moment, they normally move 8 inches, but they can only move 4 inches because part of their move is in the wood. So they're coming out the wood to get into the game. Right, so the Saracens, I'm going to keep calling them Saracens. I shouldn't do, but it doesn't really matter, does it? Or the Arabs, they've moved all of their units this time because they didn't roll anything disastrous on their dice rolls like the Crusaders did. Now it's the Crusaders' turn. So you can see I'm going to do the next move. I'm going to come back and show you what's happened, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to fail a movement and then the rest of your army doesn't do anything. But the Saracens have proved that in fact, you know, as long as you roll decent dice, you can move forward, and they're now in a very much an attacking position. Interestingly enough, these guys get an automatic attack next move. Nothing can stop them. They could in fact charge either of those targets. Yeah, they're looking in a much stronger position. The first casualties have been to these crossbowmen here, but now the Crusaders really must try and do something here, and hopefully they'll get a decent dice roll to make a start. I've now got to work out which is the best unit to move and the one more likely to do something. Let me just see whether the knights, they're just out of range there. That's a shame, isn't it? Because they had a pretty good chance of getting stuck in. They need to move up. These are clearly within charge range of those. These don't want to charge, but they will certainly throw their javelins. These guys need to move and shoot. And the crossbowmen now over here can open fire if they wish, as long as they get the dice to do so. So that's enough for now. What I'll do is I'll come back and we'll do, my battery's running out of power in my camera, so I need to come back and do the rest. The light's also going outside and it's getting quite dim in here, so I think I'll call it a day for now and we'll continue later on. Right, before we move on, I just thought I'd bring to your attention in Wargames Illustrated this month, there's a very interesting article by Dr. Steve Tibble about the Crusaders, the last sort of stand of the Crusaders in the Middle East, and it gives a pretty good account of what went on and how much really the Crusaders, it was a lost cause. They just had not enough support from Europe. They had financial support, but just not enough troops, and in fact, which is a good reason why you shouldn't try and reenact the Battle of Hattin, how one-sided it really was. And if you ever try and do that as a war game, I'm pretty certain that 95% or 99% of the time it will be won by Saladin and his forces, because they simply outnumbered hugely the Crusaders, and most of the Crusaders that were there, the large majority, were just pretty untrained sort of militia levy, and they, although there were a lot of good troops as well, they simply were outnumbered, and it was always a foregone conclusion what was going to happen at that battle. So don't use that one as a do a big battle with the Hattin, try and reenact it, because unless you've got some people willing to play the Crusaders and know they're going to lose, it's not really much of a game. But it also provides proof that for that period, a skirmish game is perfect, because you know, I'm sure in skirmishes things were evenly matched more than the big battles, and in fact in the Lion Rampant book, the new Crusader States book, there are some very good scenarios at the back, which I will actually get round to doing myself at some point, and they do look really interesting. There's a good one actually, Escape from Hattin as well, in 1187. I haven't read up on it yet, but it does look quite good. There's a map of the battle, and yeah, so I'll be doing that at some point. I'm not doing it today though, because as I say, I just wanted to keep today's game fairly straightforward, and now it's the Crusaders' turn. So what are they going to do? Let's have a look. So as I've already mentioned, it's imperative that through the activation phase that the Crusaders this time try and do something. They rolled badly in the last move, and not a single unit moved. So there's no rallying of battered troops required, and there's no wild charges on the Crusader side. So really it's just a case of where to start, where best to start, in the hope that we'll have success. Since a lot of the attacking needs 7+, we have to be a bit careful, but this unit here, the medium cavalry, only need 5+ to charge in. So I think we'll do that first. They're going to attempt to charge into this unit of spearmen. I would like to have thrown javelins first, but because that's a 7+ move, I think it's pushing my luck. So I'm just going to have to go in with the medium cavalry and hope for the best. So let's see what happens. Yeah, they scored 7, so they can go in. So let's move those straight in for a fight, and we'll work out what happens here. Now the medium cavalry, the attack value is 4+, and the spearmen, the light infantry that they're attacking are also 4+. They've got a defense value of 4+, so they're both attacking with an equal chance to hit. They're both at full strength. So let's do the Crusaders first. They're hitting on 4s, as I've already said. Let's give this a go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 7 hits. Now the light infantry they're attacking, it takes 2 hits to cause a casualty, which means the light infantry have taken 3 casualties. Let's just move those out of the way for the minute. Now we'll have the light infantry fight back. Again, they're hitting on 4s. 1, 2. Oh, not as good. 3. And as the medium cavalry do take a kill on 3 hits, that is 1 cavalryman that's been killed. So the first courage test, both units have lost a figure, so they both have to take a courage test. And the courage, let's do the light infantry, the Saracen light infantry first. Their courage is 4+, so we're going to roll 2 dice. Well, it's a good throw. They rolled 11, so even taking 3 off for the casualties, let's put that there, still on 8. They get 1 back for the leader being nearby, so it's not a problem. They've survived that okay. And now for the medium cavalry, they've got a courage of 4 as well, Yeah, 11. So they're okay. So now, one thing I forgot to do quickly is that, because I forgot to roll for the holy re-roll, which means that once per turn, the holy man, which is this chap here, can force any unit within 12 inches, friendly or enemy, to re-roll 2 dice in any roll that requires 12 dice. So I'm going to re-roll the 2 of the dice that the Crusaders hits that got on the spearmen. I'm going to re-roll just to see whether it would have made any difference or not. Well, one's a hit and one's a miss, so it wouldn't have made any difference, because it would have meant that they did get 7 hits on this unit. It would have meant only 6, which kept the casualties exactly the same. It didn't make any difference in that instance, but I must remember to do that. It's a new rule which I'm prone to forget. Right, both units were okay, their courage was tested and neither of them had to break. But the unit that lost the most, if you look at the after combat, what happens? Yeah, whichever the unit that removed the most casualties during the attack must retreat. And if at the end of the retreat someone will still remain within 3 inches of the enemy of that unit was fighting, continue to move those until they are 3 inches away. The retreat must be directly away from the unit it has fought. In this instance, this unit lost more figures than the cavalry, so they have to move back half a move. So let's do that now. So it's a 4-inch move. They don't become battered because they haven't failed their courage test. Yeah, they move back. Spread them out. There's this rule in one of the rules in these rules is that units shouldn't be within 3 inches of each other. I think personally I find that sometimes difficult. I mean, here that there is a definite gap. It's not 3 inches, but I'm happy with that. But if you want to do the 3-inch rule, that's fine. But because I'm also on a smaller table than normal, I'm ignoring that little rule. It's a house rule I've made. As long as there's a definite gap between units, I'm happy with that. So this unit's fallen back, and now it's whatever the Crusaders want to do next. Now this spear unit are going to have to charge in, because if they don't, they're going to get charged next move anyway. So that's the next one we'll do. So they're medium infantry. They charge on a 6 plus 11. That's no problem. So they're going to go straight in there. Now these may do a counter charge if I'm correct. Let me just check that. Yeah, they're fanatics or fierce foot, and they may do a counter charge. They have to roll, they have to get 7 or above to be able to do that. Let's just see first of all whether they do. Then they don't. Now this was a good gamble by the Crusader, because they were hoping that they would fail that counter charge, and that means that if the fanatics had counter charged, they would have been hitting on 3 plus, so that would have been quite serious for the Crusaders. The fact they're now going to only hit on 6s because it's their defense value they're counting, that's a really lucky thing for the Crusaders, that the fanatics have actually failed to countercharge. So the spearmen will go in, and that's why really when you've got a unit on the table that is very good at fighting in attack but not so much in defense, then you should always try and attack them, even if they can countercharge. You just got to hope that they don't roll enough to be able to countercharge, and that's exactly what's happened in that situation. So the fanatics have been caught off their guard, and the spearmen, which have got an attack of 4, are hoping to do a lot of damage here. Let's see what happens. Right, let's see what hits we've got. It's 5. Now don't forget that this leader can get them to re-roll 2 of them if they wish. The fanatics actually get hit on 2s, so at the moment they've taken 2 casualties. So this leader could re-roll 2 of those dice to reduce the casualties. I think he'll do that. So he'll take 2 dice away, re-roll them again. 1 was still a hit and 1 wasn't, so it didn't make any difference. So the Fanatics have lost 2 figures. Actually, I should be taking them from the front rank first. Sorry about that. Never mind. Right, so they've lost 2 figures, and now the Fanatics are going to fight back. But because they're using their defense value, if you look at the sheet here, their attack value, you see, is 3+, but they're actually in defense, so they're only hitting on 6s. Had they countercharged, they would have hit on 3s. So a big difference. So let's just see what they get there. One hit. That is all. Just one single hit. It's not enough to cause a casualty, because medium infantry, here we are, looking at this again, medium infantry, I've got an armour of 3. So it needs 3 hits to cause a casualty, which they failed to get. So that was a good charge by the Crusader Spearmen. And now the Fanatics have to take a morale test. They rolled 8. They lost 2 figures, which brings them down to 6. They get another one back for their leader. So they're on 7, which means they've passed their test. And they're not falling back, because their test, the Fanatics have got a courage of 4+, and they're obviously well within that. So they don't have to fall back. And in that instance, this unit doesn't have to test because it hasn't lost a figure, but they cannot stay in contact after a melee. Someone has to fall back. I'll just read you that description. Well, once you've determined and removed casualties from both units, either unit must take a courage test if it suffered any casualties. So the Fanatics did, and these guys didn't have to. If both units are still in contact after any courage tests have been taken, or if no tests were required, the unit that removed the most casualties during the attack must retreat. So although they passed their courage test, the Fanatics still have to fall back. Their movement distance is 8 inches, so they've got to go back 4 inches. There we go. Right, but they're not battered because their morale or their courage was still okay. Right, what next for the Crusaders? Both these units have moved. We really do need to get these cavalry nearer, so I'm going to roll to see whether the knights move up. But as I mentioned before, they're pretty reluctant to move around the battlefield. They're okay if you want to charge them, but they're not within charge distance of anybody. So they're going to move on 7+. They failed. Right, so yet again they've stayed put, and all the other units that haven't yet been activated on the board, unfortunately, cannot now be activated. So that is the end of the Crusader move. So pretty mixed there. They've won 2 melees where their troops went in, which is good, but unfortunately their knights are still hanging back on the baseline, and their 3 missile units haven't been able to shoot this move, which is a great shame. But there we are. That's how it goes, and you just have to get on with it. So now it's the Saracens' turn. Well, I think this is where the Saracens, this cavalry, have to try and attack this unit here. So let's first of all roll to see whether they do. Yes, they do. They scored an 8. Now these can attempt to countercharge. Let's just see if they do that. No, they don't. They only rolled a 6, which means they couldn't countercharge. They got to roll a 7. So that's a shame, because they would have got slightly better attacking dice had they done so. The Saracen cavalry are hitting on 4s, and the Crusader cavalry are now they're defending on 5, so it's not quite as good. So let's do the Saracens first. They want 4s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Both units incidentally take casualties every 3 hits, so that's 2 casualties for the Crusaders. 1, 2, let's take those away straight away. The Crusaders will fight back, but they're only hitting on 5s, remember, not 4s. That's 1, 2, 3. In fact, what a great shame they weren't hitting back on 4s, because they've got 6 4s there that now don't count. That's a great shame. So they've scored 3 hits, but again, this leader here can force that unit to re-roll 2 of those dice, one of which is a hit and one isn't, which means they're left with 2 attacks or 2 hits, but it's not enough to take off a Saracen. So they didn't lose any at all. So that's actually been worked out this time, isn't it? This holy leader, every move he can do that. It's a very, very strong advantage for the Saracens. It could make quite a bit of difference. So the losers were the Crusader cavalry. So they have to do a test. I've got a courage of 4. Right, they rolled a 9, which is quite a good roll. They lost 2 men. They're not within 12 inches of their leader. No, he's just out. But it's enough. They're still down to 7. They're not going to have a problem with that. However, they did lose the melee, so they're the ones that have to do half a move back. Their normal move is 10 inches, so they're going to go back 5 inches. In fact, that unit, although it only lost 2, it lost another one earlier, so it'll be -3. But it still would have been fine. It would not have failed its courage test. So now I'm just going to do the rest of the Saracens, and then I'll come back later and tell you what's happened. Actually, I will show you what's going to happen here, because the fanatics will automatically charge in on this spear unit. I just think I might as well go through that with you, because they had a big advantage this time, of course, because they're hitting on 3s. So they should do a lot of damage here, and the defending medium infantry, they still got a defence. They're hitting on 4s, so they're still quite good. But let's just see what happens here. So they need 3s to hit the Crusader infantry. Look at this. Oh dear, 11 hits. Wow. Now that is serious, isn't it? Now the medium infantry, they've got armour of 3, so at the moment that is 3 hits, but they've got 2 others here. They only need to convert that into a hit, so I think this leader here will try and force that to be rolled again to see if it's a hit. Yes, it is. So they've got 12 hits, which is 4 figures, so that is pretty devastating. Those fanatics have really done their bit this time. However, the medium infantry do fight back first. They've got 12 dice, hitting on 4s. They need a good roll here. Well, actually, it's not bad at all. Oh, in fact, very good. They've got 9 hits. Now, this leader cannot ask those to be any of those to be rolled, because you can only do it once per move, and he used it to gain a benefit for his own troops, so he can't ask any of these to be re-rolled. So that's 4 casualties on the fanatics as well. So in fact, these spearmen, although they've lost 4, they've done really well to get 4 losses back, but they've both got to test. So let's roll first for the Crusaders. They rolled a 9. Their leader is within 12 inches, so that becomes 10. But of course they've taken 4 casualties, so take that off. But their courage is 4, so they are fine. They've passed that test well. And now for the fanatics, their courage is 4 as well, But remember, they've not only lost 4 men this time, they lost 2 in the last move. So that unit has lost 6 figures so far this game. So let's roll this and see what happens. Well, they rolled a 9. I'm actually rolling quite well for courage tests at the moment, which is quite unlike me. Normally I'm rubbish. But anyway, that's 9. They do gain 1 for the leader being nearby, so that puts them on 4. But they've lost 6 figures, so take 6 away. That leaves them on a total of 4. They've equalled their courage test, so they're okay. Just move those casualties out of the way. If it's a draw, and both units have also lost the same amount of casualties, it's the attacker that must fall back. So the fanatics have got to go back 4 inches. There we go. So that was a pretty... Actually, the Crusaders did well there, because I really expected them, especially when the fanatics got 12 hits. But of course the armour saved the medium infantry. They do have got an armour of 3 as against the fanatics only an armour of 2. So that saved them. Right, I shall now do the other moves and I'll let you know what's happened. This unit are now going to open fire. I haven't covered this yet, but so we'll do it. They've got an 18-inch range, and as long as someone from that unit can see this target, they can fire. In fact, they can all fire anyway. Look, the angles are pretty acute, but they can all fire. But in these rules, as long as one figure can see the target clearly and is with range and line of sight, the whole unit fires. So they did roll enough to be able to do that. They had to roll to attack. They had to roll 7+, and in fact they did roll a 7. So let's just see what now happens. They're hitting on 5s. They've got a range of 18 inches, but if it was over 12 inches, instead of hitting on 5s, they only hit on 6s. But they are within 12 inches, so they're all going to fire, and they're looking for 5s to cause a casualty. Well, it's 3 casualties, 3 hits, and as we know, the armour for that unit is 3, so that is 1 casualty, which I'll take off, and that forces this unit to take another morale test because it has lost a casualty. Let's just see what happens. 6. Now we're in a bit of trouble here, because now it gets a bonus for the leader of the warband here, so that puts them on 7. There you go. But that unit so far has lost 5 figures, so straight away they're back down to 2 again, which means they failed their courage test. However, the final score is greater than 0. So it just retreats half a move and it becomes battered. So they have to retreat half a move. They've normally got an 8-inch move, so they're going to go back 4 inches this direction. There you go. And we're going to have to place a battered marker by that unit. I use shields for battered markers, so it looks the part. So they've just got a shield now that unit is battered. It must rally next move before it does anything else. The other thing I did earlier was this unit opened fire over here on the crossbowmen. They took another casualty, but their courage test was fine. Right, I've shown you a couple of things there just because we haven't covered those before, but now we'll actually do the Crusaders move, and I will, unless there's something different, I will just come back and tell you what they've achieved in their move. Now, there's one thing you need to know now is that this unit, which is now at half strength, will no longer roll 12 dice. It will now only roll 6. Likewise, this cavalry unit here, which is now down to just 3 men, will also now only roll 6 dice. But all the others, although they've taken casualties, this casualty, although it's battered and has to do a courage test next move, it can't do anything else. If it is attacked, it still does get 12 dice because it's got more than 50% of its original total in the unit. So the first thing the Crusaders have to do, and I'm going to show you this because we haven't covered it before, is that this unit is a battered unit, and before you do anything else, if you look on the sheet, the activation sheet, here we go, you see that it says you must rally battered units before you do anything else. So let's do that first. Just roll this. Well, it's rolled 12, so it can easily remove that battered marker, but it can't do anything else. That is its move. Then the next moves is activate any wild charges. Well, we haven't got any, and now it's up to the Crusaders to decide what they want to move. So I'll come back later and let you know. Unless anything happens I need to tell you about, I'll just come back and tell you later what's happened. Okay, so I've done the Crusader moves. The first thing that happened was over here, these light cavalry moved around here. They could have done half a move and tried to shoot, but these were blocking it, and they couldn't move very far anyway. So they've done a full move and are now ready to open fire next move on this unit here. This unit here was here. I'll move them back. They did manage to move, and they've moved back out of the way. They were looking a little bit vulnerable, stuck in the middle there, faced by so many enemies. So I've moved them back, and thank goodness the knights have finally managed to move up. They're not within charge move. They are now, but at least they've managed to move up into a better position. These couldn't do anything more anyway. Then at this point the crossbowmen opened fire, or tried to open fire, but they failed to activate, which means that those, and yet again the javelin men in the marsh, can't open fire, which is a great shame. So it's now the Saracen turn. So the first thing the Saracens wanted to do was to charge the knights. They were hoping that the knights wouldn't be able to countercharge, but they did. They rolled enough to be able to countercharge. So now there's going to be a big fight in the middle here. The medium cavalry, the Saracen medium cavalry, hit on 4s, and the counter-attacking men-at-arms or knights were hitting on 3s. So I think the Saracens were hoping that they wouldn't be able to countercharge, because they'd only then hit on 5s, but they have been able to. So I think they might regret going in here. These knights are pretty hard. Well, let's roll for these cavalry first. They need 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hits. So they've got 5 hits on the knights, but they've got an armour of 4. So that is actually just 1 casualty. Okay, let's lay him down for a minute. And now the knights are going to fight back, and they're hitting on 3s. Right, this looks seriously better. They've got 9 hits there. Now again, this leader here, the Saracen leader, the holy man, is going to force the Crusaders to re-roll 2 of their dice. 1 was a hit, 1 was a miss, which was a good move, because it now means they take 3 hits to cause a casualty. So that's 3, 3, and the other 2 are discarded. So they've only lost 2 rather than 3 figures. Let's lie those down. Right, so both units have to do a courage test. Let's do the Saracens first. It's 7. They gain 1 for this man here, 8, and they've lost 2, so they're back down to 6, which means they're fine, because they've got a courage of 4+. And now the knights, which have also got a courage of, they've got a courage of 3+. They rolled 7. The leader's with them, which is 8, and they lost 1 back down to 7. One thing I forgot to do: if your leader is with a unit, there is a chance he could be killed. This is called a lucky blow, but it's a very slim chance. You've got to roll 2 dice, and if you get 2 1s, then the leader has been killed. No, it's 2 4s, so he's fine. The morale was okay, the courage was okay, so both units took casualties, but the Saracens took more, so they're the ones that have to move back. So their attack, in the hope of catching the knights off their guard, didn't quite work. Okay, the other thing that happened here was these spearmen went into this unit. They countercharged. They lost 1 more figure. The spearmen lost 2. Their courage test was okay, but they still had to fall back, so they're not battered. Okay, what's happened next is that first of all, the Crusaders failed to do anything. They had a disastrous first attempt to activate a unit, and they failed that. So they weren't able to do anything. It went straight back to the Crusaders. We've had another melee here. This unit had to fall back, having lost more men. It's only got 2 left now, and the Crusaders did have 3, but then this spear unit charged in here on them again because they were so near. They're a bit sort of stuck on their own at the moment. They need a bit of support. They lost another figure. They did cause 3 casualties on the spearmen, and when they did their courage test, in fact they routed completely from the field because they just rolled a 3, and as they'd lost 7 men from that unit already, even gaining the point from having their leader nearby, it wasn't enough because it only gave them 4, a total of 4, minus the 7 losses. They were on a minus figure, which means they have to rout off the field. Now the fanatics have charged in as well, so they're really trying to kill this Crusader warlord, who is now looking a bit beleaguered, and he's only got another man with him. He's surviving. He's had no lucky blows against him, but I just thought you'd like to witness what happens here, because the fanatics, although they only get 6 attack dice, they are actually hitting on 3s. The Crusaders failed to countercharge this time, so they can only fight back with 5s. So let's just see what happens. They're both now only rolling 6 dice because they're both under half strength. Well, these are at half strength, but it can be at half strength or under. They roll less dice. So they've got 5 hits, which is enough to take another figure off. Let's lay them down for the minute. Let's just fight back with 5s and see if they do any damage. Well, they miss completely, the Crusaders. So let's just see whether it was a lucky shot. Oof, at least 1-1, but it wasn't 2. But they've now lost 5 figures from that unit, so they must now do a test. Let's see what they get. Well, that's a bit of a disaster. They've rolled 2. He gains 1 back because he's the leader, so that's 3. But he lost 5 men from his unit. The final score is 0 or negative, and the unit routs. So the Crusader has routed. The Crusader leader, the lone figure left in that unit, has now routed off the board, which is pretty disastrous, really. But it's, you know, the Crusaders are still in the game, but they've now lost a lot of figures. So we'll continue for a bit longer and see what happens. He went there and he fought off 3 different units, and finally they've caused a lot of casualties. They routed the infantry that were here. They've knocked that unit back to 2. They didn't manage to get any hits on this unit, as you could see. So they've now gone, and the knights have been killed, and it's still the Crusaders' turn. I'll let you know what happens with the last few moves. Okay, so just to let you know, the game is over effectively, and the reason for that is this. As you know, the warlord, he routed off the field here. There's one thing that the Crusaders had, was a special characteristic of these Crusaders is that they may re-roll 1 failed courage test throughout the game. I forgot to mention it, but I had used that earlier on the knights when they had to do a courage test. But anyway, so once you've used that, you can't use it again. He routed, which meant that all the other units on the table had to do a test, because when the leader was killed or flees off the table, you have to do a test for courage for the remaining units. Both of these units were okay for their courage test. The spearmen that were here, unfortunately, they'd lost quite a few men anyway, and they rolled a disastrous one, so they routed off the field. And the crossbowmen were okay here, but when it was the turn for the Saracens to open fire, they lost another 2 figures, and they've done a courage test and they've fallen back, and they're now a battered unit. So effectively, I think the game is over, because if you look on the table here, these are the casualties, if you can see that clearly, of the Crusaders. They've lost a full unit of spearmen, they've lost 5 of their crossbowmen, all their cavalry is now gone. No, sorry, their knights and their medium cavalry. These guys over here are still all right. But, you know, two skirmish units are not going to win the battle for them, and the only other decent unit they got are the crossbowmen that are down to nearly half strength anyway. Whereas over the other side, you can see the Crusader losses are much less. They've lost an entire unit of spearmen, and they have lost 4 of their cavalry and half of their fanatics, but they're still in a much stronger position. So I really can't see the Crusaders recovering from this, so I'm going to call it. There we are, the game is over. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed sort of showing you how to play the rules, and I haven't covered everything, and I couldn't possibly, it'd take too long. But I just wanted to go through a game that I played using my Crusader figures and using the new supplement from the Lion Rampant, the Crusader States, just to show you how a typical game would go. I think you'll agree it's very much dependent on how you roll for activating units. Certainly the fact that if you do fail to activate a unit, then the rest of your army doesn't move, can really hamstring you considerably. Unfortunately, the Crusaders managed to mess up their activations a bit more than the Saracens did, and that was pretty crucial. But it is the same for both sides. It's just the luck of the dice. If you decided that is something that you don't enjoy doing, you know, making the whole army sort of not do anything else, you could always put a house rule in. Maybe after the second time it's happened, you might want to decide that's all the one side can do. They have to stop after maybe 2 fails, or just do per unit. You know, it's entirely up to you. I've used the rules today exactly as they are in the book, and I know that Daniel Mercier has always said, you know, if there's something you don't like in the rules, then change it, do a house rule. But I think it works well enough. I like to consider that when a unit fails on its activation, and nothing else moves, that's just a fog of war. You know, battles don't go to plan, things do go wrong, communications break down, morale of troops sort of vary, you know, and anything can happen. So I think that sort of accounts for that fog of war happening. It is unfortunate if you should do it 2 or 3 times in a row and your army seems to be stuck doing absolutely nothing. They can still defend themselves, of course, but they can't shoot back if they're fired at. They can defend themselves if attacked, but it can make it very difficult, which the Crusaders found today. They didn't roll too well when it comes to activations. But as I say, it's the same for both sides. You just have to either just get on with it and do that, and hope that you do at least activate some units, and accept that sometimes the day's not going to go for you, you know, for whatever reason. I don't think there's much more I can tell you at the moment in this video. It just shows you how very enjoyable these games can be. I'm playing solo at the moment. We can't meet up with friends and have a game, unfortunately. So I use this as an opportunity to just have games and learn more of the rules. I haven't played Lion Rampant for a little while, to be honest. I was a little bit green. But I've played them before and I've enjoyed them, and I've very much enjoyed this game again. What I will be doing is I shall be looking at the scenarios in this book, and there are some very exciting ones. The Escape from Hattin looks quite interesting. There's an introduction, then there's the setup that you have to do, special rules for each scenario, and then the ending scenario and victory conditions. So I shall do one. I might well do that one actually, and if I do, I shall let you know how I get on. I won't necessarily go through the entire battle, move by move, but I will give you a rough outline of how that scenario works. So that's it for me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I haven't gone on too long. I was going to speed through it a bit quicker than that, but then interesting things happened and I got carried away with myself, which is usually the case. So I hope you've enjoyed it anyway, and I hope you've learnt from that. And if you are considering buying a fairly straightforward set of rules that do give a fun game, then go out and buy them. You won't be disappointed. They're not expensive. They're under, I think they're under £10 now. I've seen them on for sale various places under £10, so they're a very, very good buy. So look after yourself, keep well. I hope we can get wargaming soon, and I'll see you again soon anyway. Bye bye.